Evening, YouTube. Hope you're enjoying your week. Certainly getting warmer here in southern Missouri. I do appreciate that. This week's portion is Tazria, which means she conceives. It's Leviticus 12:1 through 13:59. And as an overview, we have the purification of women after childbirth. We have the laws about leprosy and cleansing a leprous garment. So I had a question. We got into the 5 different offerings last week, and so which is just about as deep as I've ever got into it. And I saw that. Well, I'm gonna read it about the purification of women after childbirth. What I could understand a burnt offering, because a burnt offering is to enhance your relationship with the Most High, but the sin offering for having a baby, I just didn't understand that. Not that I do now, but so let's get into it. So what sin has a woman committed when she has a baby that she would need to have a sin offering? So that's my question. Leviticus 12:1 through 8. And Yahweh spake unto Moshe, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, If a woman have conceived seed, and born a man-child, then she shall be unclean 7 days, according to the days of the separation. For her infirmity shall she be unclean. And in the 8th day the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. And she shall then continue in the blood of her purifying 30 days. She shall touch no hallowed thing, nor come into the sanctuary until the days of her purifying be fulfilled. But if she bear a maid child, then she shall be unclean 2 weeks, as in her separation, and she shall continue in the blood of her purifying 66 days. And when the days of her purifying are fulfilled, for a son or for a daughter, she shall bring a lamb of the first year for a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering, unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation unto the priest, who shall offer it before Yahweh and make an atonement for her. And she shall be cleansed from the issue of her blood. This is the law for her that hath borne a male or a female. And if she be not able to bring a lamb, then she shall bring 2 turtles or 2 young pigeons, the one for the burnt offering and the other for a sin offering, and the priest shall make an atonement for her, and she shall be clean. So, I thought back, and Yahweh told us to multiply, and that's in Genesis 1:27. So Elohim created man in his own image. In the image of Elohim created he him. Male and female created he them. And Elohim blessed them, and Elohim said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. And there's some issues with this verse. It's covering a lot of territory, but my thing here is to multiply. So we're told to multiply, but that was before Adam and Eve sinned in the garden. So next in Genesis 3:16, sorry about that. Unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. So, interesting. So, and as a secondary object to this, let's get the timeline straight here. And to do that, we'll juxtapose Leviticus 12 with Luke 2, where Miriam and Joseph bring in Yeshua. It's talking about Yeshua being circumcised and bringing him in to pay his shekels and dedicating him at the temple. So with that in mind, I'm going to kind of read over Leviticus 12 again. Speaking to the children of Israel, saying, if a woman have conceived seed and born a man-child, then she shall be unclean 7 days, according to the days of the separation. For her infirmity shall she be unclean. And in the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. So in Luke 2:21, we have, when 8 days were accomplished for the circumcising of the child, his name was called Yeshua, which was so named of the angel before he was conceived in the womb. So back to Leviticus 4. And she shall then continue in the blood of her purifying 33 days. She shall touch no hallowed thing, nor come into the sanctuary, until the days of her purifying be fulfilled. So she can't come into the sanctuary until she's purified. So with the man-child, that's going to be a total of 40 days. So let's go over to Luke 2:22. And when the days of her purification, according to the law of Moshe, were accomplished, they brought him, Yeshua, to Jerusalem to present him to Yahweh. So the circumcision, was done at home, or certainly in their village. Back to Leviticus 12:5. If she bear a maid child, then she shall be unclean 2 weeks as in her separation, and she shall continue in the blood of your purifying 66 days. Verse 6. And when the days of her purifying are fulfilled, for a son or for a daughter, she shall bring a lamb of the first year for a burnt offering, and a young pigeon, or a turtle dove for a sin offering, unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, unto the priest. Now, over to Luke 2, verse 24. So this is Miriam and Joseph again. And to offer a sacrifice according to that which is said to the law of Yahweh, a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. And that's how we know that Miriam and Joseph didn't have a lot of money, because they gave the minimum, listed in Leviticus 12. So I'll stop there. But I think two important points there are: Yeshua was not circumcised at the temple, and Miriam didn't even show up, couldn't go to the temple for 40 days. So now back to the question at hand: what sin does a mother, to include Miriam, commit by birthing a baby? Well, what is a sin offering? To quote myself, there's some hubris, but I spent some time trying to figure out, what this stuff meant. So, and this is what I came up with for a sin offering. The primary purpose of a sin offering is not to atone for sins. Yeshua does that. But rather to purify oneself for re-entering the presence of Yahweh and resuming one's relationship with him. This begs the question: how did the mother leave the presence of Yahweh? To have to get back to this sin offering, to get back into his presence. And a lot of this applies to the laws of Nida too, menstruation. So back to Genesis 3:16 again. Unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. It is thought that by a lot of people, it is thought that had Eve not sinned, childbirth would involve no physical, psychological trauma. Many cannot focus on their relationship with the Most High while having a baby. So that's, the having a baby is gonna change your mind, your thought processes. Now, in childbirth, according to, and I don't list a lot of this rabbi stuff, because if you've read a lot, some of it's really out there. But I thought this was stuff worth mentioning. In childbirth, according to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yohai, says that many mothers make vows they won't let their husbands touch them again, or at least they think that. And that's wrong. You're not to deprive your spouse. A mother and her newborn may exist in another world. They must be pulled back, psychologically. They must be pulled back into the service of Yahweh and into her marital relationship with their husband. So that would be sin if you're out there by yourself with just your baby. So Rabbi Shalom Ephraim Lunschitz says, in the process of labor, a childbearing woman can cry out in pain against Hashem himself, committing her own sin that implements her in Eve's sin. He also says childbirth is always connected with Eve's curse and is an inescapable part of what it means to be a woman. And finally, he says, the woman succumbs to the divine curse in her confrontation with her own self as a mother. The woman succumbs, she gives in to the divine curse from Yahweh unto Eve in a confrontation with herself as a mother. E.g., she brings it on herself. By getting pregnant, everyone has to go through this, so I'm guessing it's true that everyone's mind gets out there a little bit away from the Father. So, now Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik says, childbirth, in other words, is a process in which pleasure and pain, life and death, purity and impurity are intermingled and become inextricable from each other. That's a mouthful, but that's something to think about. The two sacrifices of Leviticus 12, one for spiritual elevation, one for atonement, symbolize their dialectical nature. And I had to look that one up, but dialectical means to pull everything together, into a thought. So, Rabbi Soloveitchik also says, childbirthing is so completely intertwined with the sin of Eve, totally identified with and resultant from it, that a sin offering at the conclusion of this process now seems completely natural. So, all that Eve went through and all that a woman goes through, it just seems natural to have this sacrifice. And if you've been married, well, if you're a man, if you've been married, women know this. By the way, I realize this whole videos on stuff I don't know anything about, but I endeavored to discover as much as I could. But it is common to have mood swings during pregnancy because of stress, fatigue, and hormonal changes that affect your levels of neurotransmitters. This affects all relationships, including the one with our Creator. So, my conclusion is that this is one of the issues that Scripture doesn't put sharp edges around. Because if you look this up, you're going to, for every author, this is an exaggeration, but for every author, you're going to find a different reason. They're really out there. So there's no sharp edges around this one. And as you know, if you studied from a Hebraic, line of thinking, there's a number of subjects in that arena. So, I just wanted to articulate, if you research this as I have, you'll see as many opinions as there are writers. I already said that. But I tried to articulate ones that I thought were relative and worthy of thought. So, does a woman commit sin when she has a baby? I guess technically so, but I got to think about this one. And like I said, a lot of these things, like my wife said, applies to Nita, the menstruation and all this, menstrual time. So maybe we'll do some thinking and talk about that in Leviticus 15, that's coming up. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week.